The finale of Young Sherlock Season 1 doesn't just wrap up the season's mystery, it quietly lays the groundwork for what could become one of the most important rivalries in the entire Holmes universe. By the end of the season, viewers begin to see the early formation of the intellectual battle that will eventually define the relationship between Sherlock Holmes and Professor Moriarty. For most of the first season, Sherlock is still discovering who he is. He's brilliant, observant, and capable of solving puzzles that others can't even understand, but he's also inexperienced. He's learning how to interpret human behavior, how to trust his instincts, and most importantly, how dangerous a truly intelligent opponent can be. The season finale hints that Sherlock's world is much bigger and more dangerous than he originally believed. That's where the shadow of Moriarty begins to loom. Although the series may not fully introduce Moriarty as the central antagonist yet, the clues scattered throughout the season suggest that someone with extraordinary intelligence has been operating behind the scenes. The structure of the mystery itself feels reminiscent of the elaborate schemes typically associated with Moriarty in classic Sherlock stories. In many adaptations, Moriarty is portrayed as the only mind capable of truly challenging Sherlock. Instead of brute force or simple crime, Moriarty represents intellectual warfare. Young Sherlock appears to be setting up the earliest stage of that conflict. What makes this particularly interesting is the timing. In most versions of the story, Sherlock and Moriarty meet when both men are already fully formed in their identities, Sherlock as the legendary detective and Moriarty as the criminal mastermind. But a series focused on Sherlock's youth has the opportunity to explore something rarely seen: the origins of that rivalry. If Moriarty begins operating in the background during Sherlock's early years, it suggests that both characters may be evolving at the same time. This idea opens the door for future seasons to explore parallel development. While Sherlock is learning to master deduction and investigative logic, Moriarty could be perfecting the opposite skill set: manipulation, strategy, and long-term planning. In that sense, they would be growing into mirror images of each other. One becomes the ultimate detective. The other becomes the ultimate criminal. And neither fully realizes the threat the other poses yet. Another intriguing direction for the series involves how Sherlock's personal experiences during Season 1 shape his future approach to crime solving. The betrayals, manipulations, and hidden agendas he encounters teach him that intelligence alone isn't enough. People lie, systems fail, and even trusted allies may have their own motives. These lessons are exactly the kind of experiences that prepare Sherlock for a future encounter with someone like Moriarty. Moriarty isn't dangerous because of violence. He's dangerous because he thinks several steps ahead. Sherlock will need to evolve dramatically before he can compete with that level of strategic thinking. The events of Season 1 begin that transformation. Each mystery forces Sherlock to refine his methods, sharpen his attention to detail, and question his assumptions about how the world works. Another major factor in Sherlock's future is the influence of his family, particularly Mycroft Holmes. Mycroft has traditionally been portrayed as someone who understands political power and large-scale systems far better than Sherlock does. In many versions of the story, Mycroft is aware of threats long before Sherlock encounters them. Young Sherlock hints that Mycroft may already know more about the larger forces operating behind the scenes. If Moriarty is beginning to build a criminal network during this time, Mycroft could be one of the few people who recognizes the danger early on. This dynamic could create an interesting triangle in future seasons. Sherlock focuses on solving individual mysteries, Mycroft observes the broader political landscape, and Moriarty quietly builds influence in the criminal world. Eventually, those three paths will have to collide. Another possibility for future seasons is that Sherlock and Moriarty might encounter each other long before they fully realize who the other person is. Imagine a scenario where Sherlock solves a case that disrupts part of Moriarty's plan, or where Moriarty manipulates an event simply to test Sherlock's abilities. At this stage in their lives, neither one may recognize the significance of the other. But the seeds of rivalry would already be planted. That kind of slow-burn storytelling would fit perfectly with the tone of Young Sherlock. Instead of introducing Moriarty as an immediate supervillain, the series could build tension gradually, showing how two extraordinary minds become aware of each other over time. This approach would also make their eventual confrontation far more meaningful. When Sherlock and Moriarty finally face off directly, it wouldn't just be a battle between detective and criminal. It would be the culmination of years of subtle conflict, intellectual competition, and psychological understanding. In many ways, Moriarty is the ultimate test for Sherlock Holmes. Every mystery Sherlock solves proves his brilliance, but defeating Moriarty requires something more than intelligence. It requires patience, strategy, and the ability to anticipate a mind that works just as brilliantly as his own. Young Sherlock Season 1 suggests that this journey has only just begun. Sherlock is still growing into the detective he's destined to become, and somewhere in the shadows, another mind may be evolving along a very different path. When those two paths finally intersect, the rivalry that defines the Holmes legend will truly begin. And if the series continues building that tension the way Season 1 has started to, the future showdown between Sherlock Holmes and Professor Moriarty could become one of the most fascinating stories the Sherlock universe has ever told.